working just fine. You know what happens?
So what? Okay. Now's it working? Okay. All his fault. He pulled it out before he gave it to me. Never mind. Okay, as we start out in the book of Ecclesiastes then, we take a look here again real quickly at the purpose of the book. And really when all is said and done, the purpose of the book is to show that life without God on this earth has no meaning. Now, God created the heavens and the earth and put us on it, and He did it so we could enjoy things. Now, not only that, but He did it so we could richly enjoy all things. And yet, this book is going to show us that there's not a thing in this world you can do that's going to provide you with fulfillment and happiness unless you put God in the proper perspective. That really is what the book is about. Now, in our first class, we learned one thing, and that is the purpose of the book that we just talked about. In our second class, we learned one thing, and that is how we should view life. First thing we need to understand is, as we talked about so long last time, is that life goes in a circle. One generation comes, one generation goes. Everything in the universe just goes in a circle, which means that there is no end to it. And so it is with our life. One generation comes, Solomon said, another generation goes. Then that generation that's just come, one of these days will go, and a new generation will come along. And on and on and on down the line you go. So we need to kind of look at life as that we are on a hamster cage. We're just walking around, and we get so many turns, or one turn, however you want to look at it, and then you're going to go off of that, and somebody else is going to step on it. Now, the whole point is, what can you do while you're living in this situation to really and truly find happiness? Now, today, we're going to learn several things. We're going to learn one thing after the other. Now, Solomon will use his own life to teach us what you cannot do that will provide happiness. Or he's going to tell us what you can do that will not provide happiness. Now, all of us have the same natural, physical desires. And we look at life and we think, well, this will provide me with happiness, or this will provide me with happiness. And so we look at them, and we're all the same. We're just one generation comes, one generation goes, and we're all the same. Well, Solomon is going to use his life and show us that here are things that will not provide happiness. Now, we need to remember when we're talking about Solomon telling us about his experience, that he was the wisest man that's ever lived. He was the richest man that we know about. He was able, capable of doing anything he desired to do, and he's going to tell us that he had all of this riches and wisdom and ability, and so he said he tried them all. He's going to tell us that there was not one thing that came to his mind that he didn't try, and then he's going to tell us the end result, that when you try these things, what really do you find? Now, he introduces himself, and then he explains his approach to the book. So now we begin the new section today in chapter 1 and down in verse 12. So here's what he says down here. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under the sun. Now, I want you to note what he tells us in here. The important thing is that I set my heart. He said, this was my purpose in life. I set my heart on a goal. I'm going to find one thing here. And he said, I did it with wisdom. That is, I didn't go about it in a foolish way, but I did it with wisdom about all that is done under the sun. He said, now this burdensome task God has given to the sons of man. So he said it's really a burdensome task to try to find what will truly bring you happiness. Now, when you get to thinking about it, every person in here has tried this a jillion times. What will bring me happiness? What can I do this day or this week? Or what can I do next summer? What is it that I can do that will really bring me happiness? And so he said it really is a burdensome task. Now, when you look at mankind, ever since Adam and Eve down to now, this is what man has been trying to do. Every generation that comes, every generation that goes, has tried to find what will bring that individual happiness. And so he said it really is a burdensome task. He said, by which they may be exercised. Now, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun. So he wants us to understand he's not just a young man. He's not a novice, but he said, I have seen it all. I've had the opportunity of seeing it all, everything that's done under the sun, and indeed, all is vanity and a gasping or striving for the wind. Now again, he tells us the end result of trying to find happiness on this earth. Now keep this in mind. Every time I say that, I want you to keep this in mind. There is a way to find happiness. But keep in mind that Solomon is going for the first part of this book to show us how he tried to find happiness without God. That's the key. Without bringing God into the picture. Let's just suppose that you and I have all the millions of dollars that we could ever want, have good health, have wisdom, have everything that there is, and so we set out to find what will make me fulfilled. What is it that I can do in life so that I have a fulfillment? I really feel good. I really feel happy. What is there that I can do? Now he said, when we try this, here's what you're going to find out. All is vanity. Now, remember what vanity means? Boy, that's quite a word. It means it produces no results. It is useless. It is vain. There's no way you can find any accomplishment. That's what vanity means. That we're striving at something of where you can't win. And he said it's like a gasping or striving after the wind. So then to give us a more picturesque idea, he said, suppose that the wind's blowing out here. Now, you can think about it blowing like it is now, 5 miles an hour, or in a hurricane, it doesn't make any difference, 150 miles an hour. Suppose I gave you a bottle and told you, run out and catch me a bottle of wind. Now here's a bottle, and as soon as you catch the bottle, put the cap on it. Bring me in a bottle of wind. Well, now how long would it take for you to bring me in a bottle of wind? Because every time you get that wind in the bottle, put the cap on it, it's no longer wind. It's just air. And you have been running around out there trying to catch the wind, and how long would it take you to catch the wind? You say it's impossible. Do it all your life. You can never catch the wind. That's right. He said that is exactly the same thing as trying to find happiness on this earth without putting God in the proper perspective. And that's what the first part of this book is going to be about. He said, what is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. So as you come into this earth and you decide, well, I'm going to live here, and so now I'm going to do something about it. Well, there's something you're not going to do. Whatever there is in nature, whatever there is out here that's crooked, you're not going to make it straight. And whatever is lacking, and you think you need to add something to it, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to live within the system. That's the point that he is making. You were born into this universe. This universe is operated on its natural law And that's the way it's going to be when you depart, when the next generation comes, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. So he introduces himself, and he said, now this is the purpose of this particular book. All right, then he goes ahead, and in verses 1:16 through 2:17, he examines all of the things that humans think will provide happiness. Now, here are the things he's going to take a look at. He's going to take a look at wisdom and knowledge and riches and wine and pleasure and laughter and power and folly and labor. And he's going to look at all these to see if you can really find happiness in them. Now, in each one of these things, you can find fun. In each one of these things, you can find good things. In fact, he's going to tell us, one of the first things he'll tell us when he comes to conclusion, he's going to tell us over there in wisdom that you can't find happiness, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But then when he gets through, he said, but wisdom is far above foolishness. So if you've got the two options, to be wise or foolish, always take wisdom, because it is far beyond that. So in every one of these things, there's fun, there's enjoyment, but there's not fulfillment. There's not human happiness, so that you can say, I have lived, I've contented myself, I have fulfilled my purpose, I'm happy that I came, happy that I did what I did on this earth. We've all heard about Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computer, dying this past week. He was probably the greatest inventor that we've had in the century. Just inventing all kinds of things and bringing all this technology and all your iPads and all these things into existence. Brilliant man, just absolutely brilliant man. Can't imagine how many things he has invented that you use every day. And it's interesting that he said that when he got into his 40s, he had a little baby. And he said, it wasn't until that child came that I began to understand life. And he said, I understand that technology is not going to change this world much. That's not the answer. Computers, iPads, that really is not going to change it much. You say, why? What do you mean? Hadn't it really changed it? No. No. You're able to do things now while you're driving down the road that you had to go home to do, to get on an old phone and call, or before the phones came, you might have to get in a horse and buggy and drive 2 miles down the street to find your neighbor to be able to tell them something. But when you get to looking at it, he said, I realize it's not going to change the world much. Because he said, one generation comes, and then we leave. And that's why he left. Unfulfilled. As you look, you'd say, well, if there was ever a man that could really feel fulfillment, happiness and contentment, it would be that man. Nope. He said, whatever I've done is not going to change it much, because he said, you come, you do it, and you die. That's what Solomon is saying. He's trying to show us all of these things. Now then, as we get ready to continue on then today, when we get into verse 16, we're in a section of the Bible that nobody believes. I'm looking out there in the face today of all of you guys, and not a single one of you believe these verses. Now, not only that, but you look at me, and I don't either. Now, you look at it, and you say, well, what do you mean you don't believe? I think there's a couple passages in the Bible that nobody believes. One of them is this, and that is that what he's getting ready to tell us is just so, well, you put it, it is so unbelievable that we can't believe it. We think, well, I know better than that. The other one is in Matthew 6. You remember where Jesus talked about lay not up for yourself treasures on earth, and then he explains it. And he said, take no thought for tomorrow, and then he goes on. And he said, don't worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear. The Lord knows about the birds, and the Lord will take care of you. Do we really believe that? Or how many of us has hung on to we've got to have it in the bank. We've got to have our 401 in there. We've got to do this. I've often wondered what would happen to me if we wake up in the morning, which could be easily done, and find that our total financial system has collapsed. I don't have a dollar. I don't have any. I don't have anything. I go and look at my billfold, and maybe I've got $50 in there, but I go to the grocery store and I find that $1 now won't buy anything, that it takes $50 to buy a loaf of bread. What would I do? Would I be happy? Could I get in my car and drive home and say, honey, a loaf of bread costs too much. A loaf of bread costs $75. Now, there are countries that this happens, so don't think it can't happen. But could I be happy? See, I don't think so. In fact, I don't have the slightest idea that I could be happy. And that's what I mean. When the Lord tells us certain things, it is so great, it is so unlike anything we're used to, I can't grasp it. I can't believe it. Now let's listen to what he's going to tell us and see if you can really believe this and say, yeah. All right, now he's going to tell us about what he's done. He said, I communed with mine own heart, saying. So I said, I want you to notice, I didn't just jump into this thing, but I meditated about it. I thought, and I analyzed, and I thought in my mind, I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. He said, lo, I have gotten me great wisdom above all that were before me in Jerusalem. Stop. Now go back and remember, God bestowed upon him miraculous wisdom. And God told him, I'm going to make you the wisest man who has ever lived and the wisest man who will ever live. So God has promised none of us are going to be as wise as Solomon. So now Solomon has, as one man, he has the greatest amount of wisdom that will ever be bestowed upon a human being. Just like Adam was the first man, Solomon was the wisest of all men. So he communed with his heart, and he says, what would a wise man do? What should a guy like me, who has miraculous wisdom, if I use it responsibly, what should I do? And so he communed with his heart. And he said, well, I will use it to see what I can do to find happiness and contentment. So he said, yea, my heart hath had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So I said, now I've had all of these things. 17. Now here's the interesting thing. It doesn't take Solomon long to give us the conclusion. Now, had I been writing the book, I'd do it like I'm teaching this class. And I'd be doing a lot of talking. And I would say, I tried this over here and it didn't work, and I tried this over here and it didn't work, and I did this and blah, 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 blah. But Solomon, he just makes a statement. He said, now I want you to know, and all of us should know, I have this miraculous wisdom, have all of this greatness, and so I tried it. He said, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I perceived that this also was a striving after wind. So he said, here's what I did. I applied my heart to know wisdom. I used my wisdom in the wisest way you could use it. And of course, we go back and we know that Solomon gave such great, wise advice. Even the Queen of Sheba came hundreds and hundreds of miles to come up to talk with Solomon. And when she talked with him and she left, she said, the half has not been told. In other words, he is so wise. He answered all my questions. She was the queen of a country. She had lots of questions, as any leader of a country has. And so she asked him all the questions that a queen could ask a man about, what should I do about this? What should I do about that? And he had so much wisdom, he answered every one of them, and she said, the half has not been told. Now, you telling me that wouldn't bring you happiness? If the whole world came to bow down at your feet because you were the wisest person on earth and could answer any question anybody could give you, tell me that wouldn't bring you happiness? That's what Solomon said. I used my wisdom to its full extent, and then I used it to know madness and folly. That is fun. I had my parties. I had all of the joy that you could possibly have. Anything you could have as far as entertainment and so forth is concerned, I had it. Now tell me that wouldn't bring you happiness? And you say, well, I've done anything that you can possibly do. I've taken this trip and that trip, and I've done this and I've done that, and so keep in mind, if you ever threw a party, you could never throw one like Solomon. Solomon had so much gold in the back room, he could go in and take his knife and cut off a little chunk and have more money than we'll all ever have in our lifetime. So he was capable of doing any and everything. He said, I tried it all. I tried my wisdom. I tried my knowledge. I tried foolishness. And I perceived that this also is a striving after the wind. It just didn't produce happiness or contentment. It was not there. Then he said, for in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. This is what I mean when I say that he was very brief. He's going to tell us what it is to have wisdom and knowledge. If it doesn't bring happiness, or if I had all of this, and I know more than anybody in the world knows, wiser than anybody could ever possibly be, why wouldn't that bring happiness? He said, because there's something else that goes along with wisdom and knowledge. When you get wisdom and you get knowledge, it increases your grief. Because then you're able to see problems that you never were able to see before. If you look at life and start out with a child, and they're going to kindergarten next year, that little child is just running wild with enthusiasm because next year they'll be in kindergarten, and that'll solve all their problems. That's going to bring them happiness. And they're just thrilled to death. Well, you as a parent can look at them, and you have the wisdom and knowledge to know, honey, this won't do it. Kindergarten is not the end of the road. Kindergarten is not where you're going to spend the rest of your life. But you're just now entering into the educational system. You're going to go to school, and you're going to have your little heart broken. You're going to have other students get you in trouble regardless of how good you might be. You're going to grow up, become a teenager, and you're going to, again, get your heart broken. You're going to, and so as an adult, you look at them and you see 1,000 problems that child's going to have, but all they see is happiness because they're going to kindergarten. Then you can move on up into your teenage years. And what teenager is there that doesn't think if I just had a car, it would solve all my problems? And so you, though, as an adult, you know that will not solve your problems. And then people say, if I just had a child, that's all I ask. And there are people that almost go crazy because they can't have a child, and they want a child, and that would solve my problems. And people have been through it, look at them and say, oh, honey, your problems just begin. Because then you're going to be burdened down with all the problems that you've got, plus the problems of your children, and your heart is going to be broken. Now, where do you get all this wisdom? I mean, where do you get this knowledge? So you get it by wisdom because you're so much wiser than that young person. Now, as you grow up, I don't care how old you get, how much experience you've got in life, you look at things, and the wiser you become, the more grief it's going to bring you. If you look at, let's say, governmental problems, and you see today, we're in such a bad shape financially and all these ways. And so you look at it and you say, boy, I think I'm going to study this out. I want to know. Well, the more you study it, the more sorrow it's going to bring you. Because the more grief is going to come. Until finally you're going to come to the point that you'll shake your head and say, I don't know what the solution is. I used to know. Last year I knew. How many times have we done this as we go through life? Yeah, I know what we ought to do. Here's what we ought to do. And we hear all the politicians say this. But when you get really down to it and you really glean the wisdom and the knowledge of what is going on, how things are tied together, it scares you to death. You say, wow, what I thought we should do would just turn things upside down. And that's the way it is with everything in life. The more wisdom you get, the more knowledge you have, the more danger you see. We see this in every occupation that you have. If you go look at a building, and they're building this building, how many times has it happened to you that you go through there with a contractor or somebody that knows 100 times more about building than what you know? And so you look at this beautiful building that's going up. And this guy will walk over and he'll look at, and he'll, what's going on? He knows something about that I don't know. Now, I think this is really pretty. But he knows about the angles and so forth, and that could really cause some problems in future days. And the more you know about building, the more problems you see. If you decide you'll become an airline pilot, and so the more you learn, the more problems you see. And all of a sudden, you see problems by the time that you taxi down at the end of the runway. You push on the throttle. Your life is filled with problems. You know you have to get a certain speed. You know it has to be within a certain limitation. You know this, and you know that, and you know this gauge has to be here, and you know this. And you've got to put everything together. And every takeoff, when they take off and they get up, the pilot will go, "Phew, that's good." And so then they go on. And while you're driving along, riding along, drinking coffee, they're thinking about the landing. Now, we got to do this, and we've got to do that. And so it doesn't make any difference what it is. And with your occupation, you know the same thing is true in your occupation. The more you learn, the more problems you see. So that's what Solomon is telling us. He said, here's the problem with wisdom and knowledge. The more wisdom you got, and the more you know, the more problems you're able to see, and the more grief it brings to your heart. So, that's not the answer or solution to life. And so he says it's just another thing that's striving after wind. Now in chapter 2, he starts, and time is almost up, and I'm just going to get started on this. He said, I said in my heart, come now, and I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also was vanity. So I said, okay, I see the wiser I get, smarter become, that just enables me to see more problems and brings more grief. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go have fun. That's what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to have fun. As much fun and enjoyment as I can possibly have. Now, he's getting ready to tell us about the fun that he has. And you can't believe, it's impossible for us to comprehend how much fun this guy had. But he said, so I decided that I would try it in the life of pleasure. Now, if you could spend the rest of your life doing nothing except having fun, no financial problems, you could do anything you want to do, no expenses even thought about, wouldn't that bring you happiness? He said, this also was vanity. It just cannot produce happiness. Now we might say, why? Well, as we look at people engaged in this, we can look at our movie stars or our real rich people, and we notice that unhappiness, the drug problem, suicide, all of that is so high among those people. Every time that you hear of some beautiful girl or handsome man, 38 years old, they found him dead in bed, what do you know? You know the drugs. Why did they take those drugs? Why did they overdose? Why did they kill themselves? Unhappy. Why were they unhappy? Because they were so pretty and they had so much money. That's the reason they were unhappy. Because they could do anything that they wanted to do and the whole world came and bowed down at their feet. There's no fulfillment in that. It's emptiness. It's like eating sawdust or eating paper. You never get filled. And he said, that's the way it is when you try pleasure. Next week, he's going to pick it up there and he's going to tell you the kind of pleasure he tried. And it's going to be unbelievable. Okay, class dismissed.